Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Quantum Bridge again. So, with myself, Gary, and my co host, Casper, who will introduce our guest for today and go through what we're going to be talking about.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Quantum Bridge. And we're welcoming today Joe, again from Australia. Now, we've spoken to Joe a number of times now, and we've gone into the aspects of her work, specifically around various things that tie in with architecture and her vision and how that manifests. And first, obviously, just to say welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you for coming back. And we are today convening with the idea of talking about manifestation and what that means in both its broadest terms to you and obviously in terms of architecture, but definitely in terms of your life in general and how that has been maybe the mainstay of the way that you do things and look at things for some time now. So before I start rambling on too much about that, I'm turning it over to you. And Joe, what does manifestation at the moment mean to you?
So manifestation right at the moment, which very different to how I used to view it, which was kind of through the more McDonald's variety of The Secret, and sort of packaged up and brought to us as if you could just think a car and there was a car. But it's actually very different to me now. It's actually a resonance and a frequency. So it's aligning yourself that goes deeper than just, oh, I want a red car. It's like it goes deeper to what connects your soul, what connects your heart, and what you want to create for humanity moving forward. So there's all those alignments that come into place. And so the frequency of those brings you joy. And so you've got to look for those frequency that aligns with the joy that helps to resonate towards that manifestation. So it's a kind of a deeper process, but also too, you have to get your own self out of your way.
Is this why I don't have the red Ferrari yet?
Well, the thing is, you have to fall in love with the red Ferrari. You have to get the whole idea of notion of, do I need a red Ferrari because I look really cool driving around the streets of London or something? Like, you have to get into the deeper meaning of why it feels good for you to have that car and the feeling of having that car, and then actually getting yourself out of your own way. So if something comes up of, if someone's going to think I'm a wanker in a red car or something, then you got to bat that out of the way, or, oh, I'm not worthy of having a red car. I mean, we've heard about all these things, like forever and a day, but it's basically kind of resonating and kind of pulsating towards that. And if the red car is driven by absolute sheer joy and desire that comes about from everything else that you love, then it will surely come into your life. But if it's coming about for the wrong reasons, then it won't be true for you. It'll just be a whim. So it has to be true to who we are. But going back to the portal of sacred geometry, how that relates back to architectural spaces. So I was in Montserrat back in 2017, and in the main square, which was rebuilt 200 years ago, there's this round portal. It's like a vortex, and it has the astrological sign around the edge of it. And the tour guide said, stand in the middle and you can feel the energy. And he said, put your hands up and you can feel the energy. And so I was like really intrigued with that. And I can feel and sense energies pretty sharply in some of these places. So I stood in the middle and I put my hands up and I closed my eyes and I could feel it, the energy, and it felt like a clean energy coming up through my feet and up through my body and out. And then I realized that I was tuning into, the sacred circle, sacred geometry. And in that moment, you create a notion and an intention, a very strong intention. I walked into there to create the intention to clear out of my field what doesn't serve me anymore, because I knew that I was hanging on to a bit of baggage back in 2017. And so lo and behold, the universe did deliver, and in the form of a few interesting emails between family members that revealed themselves to me and what my part was in playing back and pandering. And I'm like, be careful what you want to manifest. It can happen fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So yeah, that was a very pure intention, and a lot of stuff did come up to heal and to move on. So in the sacred geometry, I did a workshop that was Permaculture Society of Northern Beaches, and how you can use sacred geometry as a form of intention so that you can plan your garden, or you can plan whatever you want to create at home, so you can tune into your vision. So it was basically the 5 platonic solids, which one you resonate with the most. So there's no set formula. It's just, and then you visualize that in your mind, and through that shape, you have your end result. You have your intention, which is, and you hold it. So through the frequency of the sacred geometry, you create, the manifestation and the joy and the feeling of what it is you want to create. Now, conversely, the darker agendas, the cabal, the deep state, whatever we want to call these lower frequencies, they use sacred geometry and have used it for many, many years as symbolism, which, as we know, is going to be their downfall. But the symbolism of the sacred geometry and the patterns, the frequencies, they amplify those. So if they want to amplify fear, they'll do that. So they use it in the dark realms. We can conversely use it in the light realms. And that's where the power is to, create and amplify, so that sacred geometry becomes the amplification of the intention. So I'll give you another example of this is how I manifested my beautiful husband into my life. So I was going over to Africa and did a couple of soul safaris back in 2010, 2011. And I had divorced my ex-husband in 2009. And we, and we're still good friends. So it's an amazing manifestation of remaining friends with your exes and still getting along with each other, which is fantastic. So in one of the little villages, they have these Songomas, white witch doctor, and he threw the bones down. This was strapping 6'7", sort of chief shaman, Songoma, and he throws the bones down and he says, you need someone in your life who will have your back and who loves you fearlessly. And I was like, that'll be nice, because, I've been dating some people that weren't aligned with who I was and what I was working through. And anyway, so I kind of forgot about it, went back to the retreat that we were doing, the soul safari, where we were having, sort of sit around the fire and share stories, and then one of the girls did a reading on me, and like an intuitive reading, and she downloaded Bradley as my husband to the exact T. And I had kept a copy of that, which was very much like flowing on from the Sangoma. So when I got back to Australia, I put it in an envelope, and then I put it in my drawer. And if anyone wants to know, it was the knicker drawer, but that's only because that was the top drawer, not because that actually had any relevant meaning. I thought that was quite a funny little side bit there. So anyway, so I'm just every single night I was just focusing on the feeling of this person of coming into my life, right, rather than, okay, tick the boxes, blah, 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 blah. Because a lot of people get that confused. They go, I want 6'2", I want this, I want that, and bank account this, whatever. That they're all the wrong reasons why your heart is and your soul are choosing this on a higher level. So you're choosing a feeling rather than a list, a checklist.
And of course, Joe, just to say on that point, of course, the other being is aiming to be in resonance with that too, i.e. that's not just your choice. that's two, the choosing of two, isn't it, rather than the choosing
Yeah,
of one.
absolutely. So that 3 or 4 months later, I, was dating someone else, and it didn't work out, and I was just like, I'm ready for this beautiful guy to come into my life, and I went and had a meditation session with a friend, and where we got to was a state of non-attachment, an absolute letting it go, like completely and utterly. There was no angst or attachment. It was just gone. Trust, the universe, ether, God, frequency, whatever you want to call it. Within 24 hours, I'm talking to my catering lady about my upcoming 50th birthday party, which was going to be a great night at the surf club in Sydney. And she said, "Oh, you need a date." And I said, "No, I don't need a date. It's my party. I'm the princess of my party. I don't need to drag some bloke around my party, right?" And she said, No, I've got the perfect guy for you. And so, in fact, I'm surprised that you haven't really connected. And so she told me about Bradley. I had met him once or twice at a networking event, a function, but I thought he was married, so I didn't didn't go there. And turns out that he was going through divorce himself. And then basically she rings him, and she likes to have a chat. Bradley picks up the phone and she says, "Remember Joe Gillies, the architect? You need to be her date for her 50th birthday." And he just said yes straight away. And he's like, "Oh, shivers, what have I done?" That night we were on the phone for 3 hours. This all happened within 24 to 48 hours of this meditation of non-attachment. And then we ended up getting off the phone. I was like, wow, that was just the easiest conversation that I've ever had, forever. And then this was the funny part, was that we met for coffee, we ended up catching up, and then, by the time the party came around 3 weeks later, he was officially my date, because it was, and it just felt so natural.
Yeah, fantastic.
But the funny part is, get this right, when I was dating this other person who was really not working, and this other person was going on about all the females that he was dating, which is really not cool when you're on a date with somebody. And so I left and I drove home, and I wound the window down and I said, "Universe, all I want is a man who's in his heart. That's it. It's not that hard. A man who's activated by his heart. That's it." On the same night, so Bradley and I had worked this out some weeks, down the track, and I had my notebook. I wrote in my notebook when I got home. He went out, and these bunch of women asked him to go out, and they're all getting drunk, and he was like, "Oh, I don't want to be around all these drunken women." He went home. He wrote in his notebook, "Universe, all I want is a woman who's in her heart." On the same night, almost to the T of the time. And then we looked at each other and went, wow, we literally have been calling each other into our lives. And the timing was never right, like in the past, because we had worked out we kind of go back and had met when we were younger, but we didn't realize it was the same person. And so that was a great manifestation story, because it was about the intention, it was about the focus, it was about the non-attachment to the outcome, and it was about trust and faith, and a real knowing. And I feel I tried to recreate that same formula with my business, and I was like, oh, it's not working, damn it. But what I didn't realize was that I still had baggage relating around, I didn't want to just do vanilla architecture. I wanted to do something unique and special that's of benefit to humanity, because I started the awakening process of all the deceit around in the world. And at that point, I thought, how can my architecture serve this? But what I didn't understand was that I needed to unravel the very, let's call it, satanic, which is basically sorcery, in a nutshell. I needed to understand that, to unravel it, to recreate where I'm moving next. And so therefore, you had to unlearn. And in business, that's actually I think a harder thing to do, because life throws at you lots of situations, but those triggers are treasure. So whenever you have a trigger in a business situation with a client or with an authority or whatever, that's a great opportunity to go within.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the business field, as you guys know, is often, more fertile for inner growth than a very cruisy and easy and loving relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, relationships are too, but in business, it takes, I mean, like running your own business is like seriously the best personal development work you can ever do, because there's so much to learn, so much to go within, and so much growth involved. And then there's the trust, and then there's the intuition that comes in, and how do you sort of work around all of that. So the point now is that I've now got a whole suitcase full of tools that help with process, and help with process of manifesting, and also trusting the connections. Like I could sit down and write a business plan, or I can go, right, here's a sales sheet. I'm going to contact this person, this person, this person. That doesn't work for me anymore. There was a point where it did, but not now. It's the same as you guys. We all
that really resonated, Joe. Yeah.
Yeah.
That really resonates. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a kinetic frequency thing that, starts to connect and wind its way into expansion. So,
I used to get this a lot when I was in what you would call a conventional workplace, because then I'd throw out ideas and stuff, and they say, well, where have you got this from? Can you do a plan? Can you show us on a graph or something? That doesn't work like that.
No.
I don't know how I know. You're just going to have to trust me on this. I've been awake all night or whatever, and I've gone through a million scenarios. It's fine, but that was a really hard sell, I have to say. And it just time after time, you just get blocked, and then you just like,
yeah. And it's also the understanding of the structural element to that, because I think it was, and when I mean structural, I don't mean architectural structural. I kind of do and I don't, but it's like, I think it was Einstein that said, matter without spirit is motionless, and spirit without matter is just lost in the ether. I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something along those lines.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, because you need the yin and the yang to mobilize and harmonize. And like the spirit side is very strong in an activated architectural space. Otherwise it's just a box. It's just a boring business box where you're making money, and then you're designing this stuff that's just soulless, and it doesn't excite you, and it doesn't bring you the joy, because it's just a machine.
Joe,
so
in terms of that thing that Gary just touched on, in terms of blockages, and you're sort of talking about that same space as well, I feel I do get the sense that this thing of getting out of your own way, I like the fact you've touched on that. I think it's a hugely important area for us all to sit with, as it may be. But that thing of actually the resonance, or the thing that you're looking to create, has to be marrying up on some level, seen or unseen, with a desire or a need in the universe, i.e. even the person making the red Ferrari, for example, or whatever. In the end, that has to have a resonance with whomever that may ultimately end up with. So sometimes when we're blocked, do you get the sense, and maybe this is for Gary as well, do you both get the sense that when we're blocked, it's because we're not quite yet in frequency with the other manifestation that's going? Because it's not just us manifesting, right? It's everybody manifesting and building that joint manifestation, in theory. So I'd just like both of your thoughts on that.
Oh, Gary, you go first. I'm keen to hear what you have to say too.
Yeah, because I get lots of blocks. Yeah. Well, I suppose sometimes I see my personal blocks as guidance a lot of the time. So for me, it's more like I go to do something, and then it's kind of like, no, not that. Okay, well, I'll try something else, and some things just won't work out. No matter how hard you try. Well, we found this on when we was doing this channel. We approached certain people, and say, can you do us a logo or something? But it sort of doesn't work out. You think, well, why is that then? And then where's this guiding me? And then ultimately, it's like, well, your wife knows a little bit of this. Why don't you ask her to do it? Sort of thing. And it's worked a little bit like that. And then you try something because you don't want to bother people. So you think, I'll go external, find somebody else to do something, and that doesn't work out. You can get frustrated, like I might used to in the past, but now I see it as, well, it's guiding me to where I need to go. So then, so we had that. If you have a few blockages, and it's like, then I asked my brother, can you do a couple of things? And he's like, yeah, fine, I'd love to. And you're like, well, there you go. Now I'm in the right place. That's how I've looked at blockages, if you like. Now the other aspect of I think what Casper mentioned of getting out of your own way. I'm learning this. This is new to me, and let's see. I will know whether this is working for me or not, because it's a new process for me.
Well, it's also, I think, touching on that is also recognizing, like your I suppose shadow side, your limiting side, the side that tells you the little voice that goes, oh, you can't do that, or you're not allowed that, or you're not worthy of that, or whatever. I mean, we know that sometimes some of those things, which is interesting now that I know what I know in terms of, sort of the more darker agendas that have been, revealing themselves over the last, few years, let's say the last 2 or 3 years, even more so. That basically, I've now realized a lot of those are actually, sort of mind control constructs. And some of those constructs, let's call them that, basically, some of them are not our own. And some of them are. And a lot of them do come from our childhood. Now, others would argue and say that they come from past lives. I mean, I've just had enough to deal with one lifetime, let alone 50,000 other lifetimes. But the interesting thing with that is that you form a view of the world through a perceptive lens. And if that worldview is, I'm not safe, or I'm going to be a slave to servitude and beat myself up or judge myself, you have to understand that that is just a construct, that you did that to keep yourself safe in a situation that was so unbearable to deal with as a child, that you literally had to create this construct to keep you safe in the world. But what the flip side of that is that keeping you safe means also too limiting you to your expansive growth at the same time. So, but then that side of, like, for example, with me, I realized that I was always very highly creative and conceptual, and I was always very good at, in a weird way, of three-dimensional maths. In my head, I can kind of see patterns and see how they play out. But I didn't allow that to come through because I didn't trust it until, years later, when I was able to, sort of go to that space. But getting yourself out of your own way is actually understanding which construct is running the program. So if you've got, like, you reached out to somebody, for example, and they haven't got back to you, well, then is that construct rejection? And then the first thing that I used to do, which I still have a hint and a resonance of, is, what did I do wrong to annoy that person? Or have I done something wrong and they've rejected me? And so that takes courage to go into that space and go, which part of me did I reject? Or where was I rejected as a child? Or, and then it's going into that space and actually feeling the pain of it, and then healing it with the myriad of amazing tools that are available out there. And for me, it's like counseling, only takes you so far. It's a very, I would call it, it's a good starting point for some people if they're new to kind of doing the inner work, but it's very one-dimensional. It just keeps you in a loop, and basically, it gives you a few tools and, a bit of clarity, and off you go. But the healing is done in the quantum realm. That is where the real healing is, and that's where you can download and go, hang on, I've got a construct, and lately what it's been for me is judgment. And I realize that it's judgment of myself. And so that one is still hanging around like a bad smell. And I'm like, and I can catch it out now. So I can, it's been very easy to judge the tyrannical numpties that have kind of been running the world over the last 2 or 3 years, and see them for what they are, because that's what they are, tyrants. And, you can't have come through the last 3 years and not see that, unless you're still caught under mind control constructs and justify it because you want to be kept safe in your embodiment on this planet today. And those people will have their own awakening one day, and maybe they won't, maybe they will, maybe they won't. But irrespective, I was judging every single authority as a tyrant. I mean, admittedly, most of them were and still are, but I could feel the cynicism coming up, and cynicism is a veil for judgment and anger. And underneath all of that is sadness. So you've got to kind of break the layers down, because sadness is like, I feel sad for all the people that have had to suffer over the lockdowns and, the mandates and all of that stuff, which is completely traumatizing for people on all sides of the camps. So it was just like, judgment for me has been a big thing lately to shift, because you got to transcend. That's just another form of keeping you locked in a lower frequency.
Jo, just in terms of shadow work as well, is what you've just been touching on, would you consider that to have been shadow work, or for you, because it seems to be quite a sort of buzz area at the moment, is shadow work that and something else, or something completely different? I'd love to have your take on what for you shadow work is.
Well, shadow work, when I first started learning all about this through sort of alchemical work that I was doing at the time, is basically the part of you that is holding you back, is your patterns of behavior that keep you stuck in a which at the end of the day is your ego. And your ego is a construct, and that ego is, when it's healthy, it's like, oh, don't touch the stove, it's hot. So your ego remembers that, because that's a construct to keep you safe. Like literally, you're not going to go and keep touching the hot stove, right? But when it goes into, oh, I'm not going to walk into that classroom because I'm going to start breaking out in sweat and fear, because the last time I walked into a classroom, the teacher bullied me. So therefore, every time you go into a classroom situation, that's going to be your experience.
Yeah. And it becomes reinforced as well.
It becomes reinforced. So the shadow work is actually recognizing the bully, but to keep choosing what you love. Where the healing for me took place, because that alchemical structure is brilliant. What it doesn't do, it doesn't allow you to actually go into the inner realms and heal that part that no longer you have to set up that kind of like tension. You can literally just move straight into the vision, because you're actually dissolving those constructs within you more and more and more. As they come up, it gets quicker to see them and dissolve them. So you go,
is that dissolving just a lack of attention, i.e. giving them less and less attention, those things as they arise, watching them and allow them to fall away, not feeding their energy? Or do you have another way or another approach for that, Jo, of letting them subside or completely?
Yeah, because I do have a strong intellect, and that intellect can I can articulate things really quickly, and I can cut people down to the core, which has been a handy thing to have over the years when you're in my profession. But it's been also to been the greatest strength, greatest weakness, because it rabbits on in my head.
Yeah.
And I what I do now is I go, okay, I can go into the shopping centre. I can, see someone who's really, really obese and they've got like 50,000 cans of Coke in their shopping trolley. And I can go, so, oh my God, those people have no idea. Like seriously, how could you be that fat and not realize that 50,000 litres of Coke is not going to be good for you? So I'm going into judgment, right? And I'm like, why am I wasting energy on this? I'm judging this person. What part of me am I ignoring about within my own inner realm? Like what part of me am I poisoning? Because they're using the Coke as poison, like physically. What part metaphysically am I poisoning myself, and at the same time poisoning others? So I straight away go, okay, that person is their consciousness is at where their consciousness is at. I don't need to judge. And then I switch it quickly to something joyful. Like I'll go, oh, I really like that bowl that was for sale, but such and such in the mall. So I'll go, oh, I wonder if I can get it in pink or whatever. So I quickly reframe it by shifting out of that space. Yeah. And then sometimes if it lingers, which sometimes it can, then it's something about me that I need to go in there and
no, exactly that.
Remove
that transmutation is incredible. The ability to do that, and for any of us to be sort of armed with that, because it just makes life better. So that in itself is a good. But a really interesting thing you just brought up there about what you see or maybe dislike in others is on some level, or it can only ever be something that maybe in a different type of manifestation, but it appears in ourselves. So when we do look at somebody else and judge them for some aspect, there's still an aspect of us that's holding on to that, because otherwise we probably couldn't even recognize it in them. So when I do what you've just said, if it was that scenario and I would look at that as well, I still have to say to myself, well, actually, that I'm still greedy for something. It may not be for the same thing that they are, but greed exists, or I wouldn't see greed in somebody else. So if you see somebody that's, I don't know, unhappy or whatever, and you say, oh, that's, why are they always like that? Why are they always depressed? Or what? You can't recognize that, or perhaps you can't, unless there's still a level of that percolating in your own system. Would you agree with that, or do you think I'm off?
No, that makes a lot of sense, because you could say in that particular instance it's gluttony, and what am I sort of a glutton for? Self-punishment or whatever it is. So the other thing that I've really realized lately, because I've got diagnosed with Lyme, which I don't want to identify with because I want to shift it out of my system. I'm choosing to shift it out of my systems quickly so that I can upgrade myself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's basically the judging thing. I've gone into the quiet space, having a bath and candles and magnesium and blah blah blah, and I've gone into that quiet space and I've gone, what is the metaphysical reason for this? And one of them was judgment, and it was really big, and I was like, and then it hit me like bang, and I know I'm shifting this through. There's a difference between judging with discernment and judging with condemnation.
Yeah.
It's a really big difference. And I'm using the word used to up until now, judge with condemnation. And that has its own loaded, toxic frequency.
And also we've seen a lot of that, Jo, recently, haven't we? Judging with condemnation. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And judging with discernment is like, well, I've got to judge that space, so that parking space, so my car fits in. So you're kind of judging it, or you're judging the fact that some of the elite people around this world have been involved with pedophile rings, and that's okay to judge with discernment that perhaps maybe there's other forces running the show, but you have a level of understanding. You discern the situation, and then you move on. So it's like, so basically I've got to judge how much time I need to allocate to a client. for example, in terms of what we need to convey. And so the judging with discernment is like, you know, it's discernment and sometimes compassion, because you're discerning a situation like at this. So let me reframe that, you know, obese person with the 20,000 liters of Coke. Like let's just like reframe that. So if I use judgment with discernment, right, I'm going, that person has probably an inner wound that they can't, they're not ready to access. They're not ready to face the pain of what is going on inside their inner landscape. So to placate their pain, to make it go away, they drink lots of sugary drinks that give them a temporary high. So it's all about masking their own inner pain. So therefore, I'm judging with discernment, and then I'm able to flip switch it and go into compassion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the key aspect there is that ability to go into compassion. And of course, when you, in the same way that if we judge somebody out of looking at their greed, and then really what we're looking at also is our aspect within us of greed, the same thing when we look at somebody with compassion, of course, suddenly that's transmuting inside us. We're feeling that compassion, and the resonance is, and actually sometimes, I don't know if you've ever felt this or seen this, Joe, but the actual physical manifestation changes at the moment.
Totally.
We look into compassion.
Oh, absolutely. And that those energies can be picked up and realized by other people around you.
Yeah.
Which is quite powerful, you know, when you shift that. So it's like, and in getting back to architecture, it's all about like, for me, it's the intention to ignite soul in a architectural space.
Yeah.
And that is a very powerful intention, and it's not an easy thing to do, but it's a very powerful and necessary intention.
Well, actually, although we've looked at this from this conversation from many different aspects, not specifically to do with architecture, manifesting partners, but not necessarily manifesting buildings. I think that actually that's opened this conversation up for another phase where at another date, another juncture, we look at that specifically to do with architecture. I think
Absolutely.
that's really interesting, and to make that so practical in that sense as well. So
I'd love to. Yeah.
As long as you're up for that, let's try and do that sometime. I'm noticing that we're running out of time. So Joe, thank you for being so open as always. Thank you for being willing to sort of delve into yourself and be so honest.
Thank you. You're welcome.
It's incredible actually to see people, particularly now after what we've been through recently, still willing to open up and still willing to come from the heart. It's a lovely thing.
Thank you.
Anyway, on that note, from me at least, thank you very much for engaging with us all. Thank you to Joe.
Thank you, Caspar. Thank you, Gary.
You're very welcome. We'll continue this conversation at another time.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Over and out. Lovely to see you.
Thanks, guys. You
Bye.
too.
Bye.
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 Bye.